Hey there. I want to talk about the eight circuit model. I know I've been talking about the eight circuit model a lot lately. I'm really into it because it's pretty cool. Excuse me. So, first of all, I've got a kind of a chart that I've been making of the eight circuit model based off of a version of it that I've seen in the Hexen Tarot, a tarot deck that actually refers to a lot of this 60s and Cold War era technology and psychology, which is really great because it's actually still being used today quite a lot in government, especially. I don't really think they ever started using anything else, which is concerning. So I don't think the eight circuit model has ever really been reviewed to get the old science out and put the new science in, as it were. I think that pretty much everyone who's been using this stuff has basically been rooted in 60s era thinking, which has its problems. But I've been wondering, really, what's the deal with it being about space exploration? I know that it was like kind of invented in the era of whenever we were getting into space exploration a lot, in the 60s. So during the space race, people were trying to think of, what's our consciousness going to be changing into whenever we go into space. I mean, if you look at um, 2001 A Space Odyssey, you see a lot about like humanity's consciousness changing as they go on long space voyages. The movie's just as much about that as it is about killer robots. So the first four circuits are supposed to be about our life on Earth, and the second four circuits are supposed to be about our life in space, traveling, doing interplanetary exploration, or maybe even intergalactic. And I have questions. One, and I've really been thinking this for a while. I think that there's probably more circuits than this. One, I think that there's a base circuit underneath it all, a circuit zero, which is basically, I call it the controller functional circuit, and it's essentially, is this system on and is it functional? You're constantly going to be testing to see if the wire is live. So that is different than moving back and forth. Whether you can, whether you have the ability, the impulse to be able to move is different than the decision to move is different than the ability to move. They're two separate parts of a event. So I think that ability to decide to move underneath is the controller functional circuit. And I think it's technically always, it's like I've got it here in the center because I think it's actually always functional. I think it is constantly functioning. As long as we have consciousness, the controller functional circuit is like, up, dial zero for operator. So that's the operator of all of the circuits. That's getting it all done. I think this is who you talk to whenever you hypnotize somebody. I think you're talking to their operator. It's possible that having the zero circuit engaged might involve a hypervigilance of a sort, I'm thinking. So that's interesting to follow up on. I've got personal work to do involving that sort of stuff, which is, by the way, how you end up doing a bunch of this stuff is that you just have it's personal work. So space travel. Now the first four circuits, we've got the biosurvival, the territorial, the semantic time binding, and the sociosexual. So everything from what to eat, what not to eat, um, when to be dominant, when to be passive, um, communication and ordering it in a linear fashion so that it can be understood and played back by someone else, and then interacting with the rest of society um, on an adult level, I think is what sociosexual is, because I know that it's about, so Leary calls it the domestication circuit. I know this is about marriage and making children, but not everybody does that. So what function does this serve if you don't get married and you don't have kids? If you don't have sex, what function does the sociosexual circuit serve? And that question must be answered because some people cannot have sex. It's not about a psychology thing. It's not about a choice. It's not about an identity. Simply that some people are not physically able to have sex. Therefore, well, what the hell does this circuit do with them? It's got to do something besides sexual. By the way, If anybody ever wonders, like, why does anybody have a problem with like, sexual magic and sex and magic? It's because the people who go into it, they never do anything else, and whenever it's about sex, it's never actually about anything else but sex. And that's ridiculous because sex can't happen for some people, but they can have an entire human life. Any organism can go without sex and have an entire functioning life. So why is this circuit here? What function does it serve? Is it only for handing down genes? Is it only for DNA continuation through chemical evolution? Or is there something else here? And I think this is more about tempering ourselves to be able to interact with others. The semantic time binding is being able to tell your own story, but I think sociosexual is being able to play in other people's stories. And I don't think sexual needs to be there. I think they just need a better word. You don't have sex with everyone you meet, and like 60s psychologists, you'd think that they do actually think that you do that, to be honest. And I guess they're all hypnotists, so they think it can happen. So those are the first 4 circuits. And I get that would be life on this planet, especially if they consider the planet to be a breeding center. Like that's where people have babies is on the planet. People don't have babies in space. Which would be interesting if we have like more of an ace life in space. And I understand some reasons why you would do that. There's so many radioactive particles, so many cosmic rays going through space whenever you travel through space, and it's so difficult to shield against them that if you were gestating a child in space, a lot of mutations could occur, and it would be very dangerous, I think, to actually like carry a child in utero in space. So I could understand that there's kind of a species imperative to only reproduce on planet. And maybe that there's some kind of like psychic imperative to do that, like some kind of society-wide psychic force that kind of guides society to like keep it on planet. But I don't know. So neurosomatic, metaprogramming, morphogenetic, and non-local quantum. It's interesting that metaprogramming is for whenever we're going into space, because metaprogramming is where you take all the programming that was in there before and you start resetting it for different purposes. So everything that was there before was for living on a planet. And apparently all of these adaptations that we've developed for living on planet are not necessarily going to be useful in space. I mean, I'm wondering if this model is implying that whenever humanity lives in space, it starts exhibiting other abilities and starts behaving differently. That space humanity just acts different than planet humanity. Maybe we have, maybe we develop differently whenever we're in space. Maybe it's something that affects age, which I know that already the time stuff is affected. So, here's where I'm getting kind of lost because they use really big, long words. So let me get out. That's horse psychology. That's Ishtar Rising. Where is Prometheus Rising? Prometheus Rising is the one that has my 8 circuit model in it. It's probably underneath here. I have a big stack of books right next to my chair. Yeah, that's Prometheus Rising. Underneath the other books. Prometheus Rising. So he explains the circuits in here. Just gotta take a little bit to dig through them. I know I technically read this all aloud for an ebook, but I didn't really internalize all of it because it was kind of my first time reading through all of it. So let's see. There's the collective neurogenetic circuit. Oh, that's a chapter. Hold on. Mind washing and brain programming. Of course, Robert Anton Wilson is going to go talking about that very openly and not in any filtered way because it's the 60s. Or actually, it was the 70s when he wrote this. So the moral sociosexual circuit. Ah, yes, like I said, changing your behavior to suit society. Um, Good programming makes good neighbors. Yeah, if you have to live next to people, then you have to change your behavior on a certain level all the time. Specialization is for insects. I disagree. We specialize all the time. We're more hive-like than people realize. All right, so we're getting past the mind programming and the brainwashing chapters. The holistic neurosomatic circuit. There is also in us an aspiration for the mastery of nature. Health, strength, duration, happiness, and ease, liberation from suffering are part of the physical transformation which evolution is called upon to realize. Excuse me. The resurrection of the body need not be postponed until after death. It can happen at any moment. Beast with four heads represents the antique circuits. The hedonic laid-back nude is neurosomatic rapture. The serpent is the rising of the Kundalini serpent, a Hindu metaphor for imprinting the circuit 5 neurosomatic bliss control. Yes, he's talking about the tarot card for lust in the Thoth Tarot. It's not a beast with four heads. That's the seven-headed beast. Like, I got to say, there's literally not four heads on there. There are more than four heads. There are seven. This is the seven-headed beast that wears seven crowns. Hasn't anyone ever heard of Armageddon? And Revelation. The beast with four heads. So calling all downs to Dane. Array, resurrection. Array, resurrection. It is just about to roll wholly over. James Joyce Finnegan Wake. Yeah, I remember reading that out. The word psychosomatic has been around long enough to be generally understood. However, it is another semantic spook. The concept of psyche or soul was borrowed from the theologians who, being bankrupt, are in no position to lend anything. What we know and experience is what registers on the brain and nervous system. Faith, healing, regeneration, rejuvenation, bliss, ecstasy, rapture, act have been occurring for many thousands of years in all known cultures. Psychosomatic, neurosomatic. Okay, so neurosomatic is actually psychosomatic. Neurosomatic circuit of the brain is much more recent than the antique circuits previously discussed. It is not manifest in all human beings and appears late in life, usually to those who do activate and imprint it. Temporary neurosomatic consciousness can be acquired by a yoga practice of pranayama, by ingestion of cannabis, which can trigger neurotransmitters that activate this circuit. Oh, that would explain the medical benefits of marijuana. Pranayama, Aleister Crowley heavily recommended it. It is impossible to combine pranayama properly performed with emotional thought, which emotional thought is from the second circuit reflexes. So it should be resorted to immediately at all times during life when calm is threatened. Okay, so the fifth circuit, where you're using the psychosomatic stuff, it's impossible to engage with your emotions. This is very strong stuff from the mystic who filled his books with jokes and jeers and always told his students not believe me, but don't believe me. Yeah. Pranayama creates neurosomatic turn-on, sensory enrichment, sensual bliss, perceptual delight, and a general laid-back hedonic high. You're too obsessed with that. I think that what really ticks me off about the people who are writing about this, and I love Robert Anton Wilson, but I think that they are all way too into the drugs and the drug state and talking it up. I am usually in this state. It is not a hedonic high. It is a completely different centering of reality. And if you're focused so much on the hedonism and how sensual it is and how delightful it is, then you're probably not noticing what's actually going on. Try engaging your brain. Negative neurosomatic circuit effects are experienced by amateur yogis, by many potheads, and by a large number of schizophrenics, says you. The neurosomatic feedback loop in these unfortunate cases reverses of the above description. Sensory experience becomes unpleasant. Ah, yes. you get dysphoria instead of euphoria. So we have the dysphoria versus euphoria polarity here. Heaven versus hell. Light is particularly terrifying and painful, often associated with hell or with death ray machines manipulated by unscrupulous enemies. I disagree. Now, if you have a paranoia state, that will cause you to assume that's what's happening. But if you're having light sensitivity, I think that's actually associated with this state either way. Let's see. Apparently there was a Krishna who had, or a Hindu bureaucrat who took up yoga, who had this sort of bad state and came out of it and entered a positive neurosomatic state. See, they have negative versus positive. I feel this is a mistake. There is use in both. Why are you calling them negative and positive? Why are you saying that one is preferable to the other and one is only, like I said, experienced by amateur yogis, by mini potheads, by a large number of schizophrenics? It's bad to be an amateur yogi. It's bad to be a pothead, and it's bad to be a schizophrenic. But it's good to be a master yogi, and it's good to use cannabis, and it's good to engage with your own psychology. Let's see. So yeah, they're associating it with the schizoid state. Most shamans, many mystics have been through similar negative to positives. Stop focusing on the negative positive. I don't care. What is this about? 7 souls of the Egyptians, the 10 lights of the Kabbalists. Let's see. Dark Night of the Soul or the Crossing of the Abyss equals the entry to Circuit 5 the hard way. A Face and Bliss is successful 5 re-imprinting, and a man turned into pure spirit, Circuit 7, which is actually Circuit 6. Yeah, this is interesting. It sounds like Rapture. This sounds like Rapture, as is depicted of like the Rapture, the ecstasy. This is the ecstasy of Saint Teresa. There's a Bernini statue of that. The saint says he is in rapture and full of gratitude to God for giving him such a feast for dinner as plain bread and water. Many a pothead will understand that degree of neurosomatic rapture. The crew comes into his room and his bioenergy has such a charge that a cripple jumps up and is healed. The cripple merely acquired neurosomatic turn on by contact, as some people get contact high. So their circuit opened up because that person's circuit was so activated. I have that effect on people. By the way, I'm not trying to humble brag about having all my circuits opened up. It was an accident. And you can't do it on purpose. Hint: it involved getting hit in the head with a truck, so you're just not going to be able to do it on purpose. The avant-garde, 20% of the population, due to the consciousness movement, already understands every wild idea in the last few pages. They've had enough neurosomatic experience to know that they were once totally robotized, as most people still are, and are knowingly engaged in acquiring more neurosomatic know-how. When this reaches 51% of the population, a major historical revolution will have occurred as profound as the life extension revolution. I've read that sentence before. He said to reread it and think about it, and I've been thinking about it ever since. The Fifth Circuit seems to be where people start to... I think this is getting woke. I think this is waking up. Says it's nonlinear and global. You start thinking about the zeitgeist and hitting the zeitgeist. Says it's probably began to appear around 30,000 years ago. And so my question is, if it's supposed to be for space exploration, what were we doing with it 30,000 years ago? European cave paintings, many of them show exercises to increase right brain activity. Yeah, well, because you need to aim, you dumbass. With your spears. Come on. Sorry, some of this stuff is kind of light. up his own ass. Um, limbic system is the first circuit. Let's see. Quite easy to determine if the fifth circuit has been activated successfully or not. How often does a person go to a doctor if a mind researcher is glowing rather than grayish, bouncy rather than drag? No, you can't base it on how healthy a person looks. You don't know what conditions they already had that they're working on. Okay, fifth circuit is like being a sorcerer in Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange activates his sorcerer powers, and now he can use some of his sorcerer consciousness to actually operate his hands and make them do regular ass things. Oh, by the way, these are cat scratches. I play with my cats with my hands, and one of them has big claws. He was just having fun. So like Doctor Strange can't do sorcery, can't use his magic powers and do surgery, but he can use some of his magic powers to be able to use his hands so he can actually do things, have some dexterity, a regular level of dexterity, and then he uses the rest of his magic powers to do all his sorcery stuff. So he's actually used some of his awakening into the sorcery consciousness to compensate for the healing his own body needs. But I don't think that he's got a big glow about him that makes him look super healthy. He's used his powers to compensate and make him, able. I think that there's something inherently ableist in a lot of this writing here. Simple test. Any system you develop needs to be functionally usable for someone who cannot use all of their senses or their whole body that most people are assumed to be born with, because you can be born without pretty much anything in and on your body. Parts, whatever. You can be born without your ability to engage in certain senses. Helen Keller, for instance, and she ended up being a huge world-changing force. So these circuits, like, how does this work if you're in a wheelchair? Can a person in a wheelchair ever be fifth circuit engaged? If they're so good at their fifth circuit, why aren't they walking around? I think would be the question. It's like, this model sounds good whenever someone's very able, but whenever they're not able, it sounds like you're blaming someone's disabilities for their inability to activate their magic. And I find that I find that very irresponsible. I think that a lot of this book is very pie in the sky. I know that he wrote further stuff later. I actually found every time I've picked up this book and read it, I've considered it to be very outdated, and it's probably one of my least favorite of his works in terms of tone and in terms of overall structure. I find it still very useful for the whole eight circuit model it's introducing and all the information in it, but God, he's really frustrating in this one. Yeah, so faith healing is basically what the fifth circuit is doing. This is like a self-healing kind of thing. Now, that would make sense because if you're space traveling, you do not have access to a lot of medical facilities. You do not have access to a lot of anything. You're isolated. You're out on your own. But that could be said for somebody who's like wandering the desert. So what makes this space specific? What makes this very specific to off-planet life? Perhaps it's the fact that the person who's wandering the desert will eventually get back to like their people, but the person who's in space possibly will not. We may end up traveling in space for generations before we actually find a different planet. And those people who are in the middle, who are operating things while the colonists like sleep in cryo, they may go through entire lives in space that we never know about. So maybe these circuits are for them. And it would make sense that you wouldn't activate this unless it was actually necessary. And if you were in isolation a lot, then you wouldn't need the sociosexual circuit for sure. You wouldn't need to keep on projecting morals onto your thoughts and behaviors because you wouldn't be interacting with random people regularly, trying to make sure to make yourself seem presentable as safe to them, which is pretty much what projection of morals is. And the same with the rest of the circuits, I think. So, yeah, you would be able to disengage a lot of like these survival and territory and social and logic that's supposed to be shared with others types of circuits. You would be able to completely disengage those if you were going to be alone in space for a year. Your brain could basically be like, you know what, for this whole year, I'm just going to forget learning how to talk to others because I'm gonna use the entire part of my brain that usually like has to go do all this talk to other stuff, and it's gonna like solve crimes. I don't know, but yeah, you could basically disengage those circuits entirely to be able to engage these other circuits. So, hmm, I'm noticing that one half deactivates, the other half engages, and they're grouped by halves. The brain is, in fact, halved and halved and halved again in terms of its sectionals. So that's interesting. It may have to do with architecture. It might be easier to run one half when the other is shut down, which probably means we're looking at lateral and dorsal. Um, Basically, you have the dorsal and ventral. Sorry, dorsal is the top brain, the top half, as it were, and ventral is the underside. So it seems like maybe you could, if you stopped using the top half so much, which is surface thoughts are really located near the surface of your skull. Like that's the brain, the part of your brain that is nearest the surface of your skull. That's where the surface thoughts are located, fascinatingly. So your thoughts actually have an architecture, and a lot of your conscious thought, a lot of your connecting to society and having to make artifice a whole world that agrees with theirs stuff. That's all top half stuff up here on the upper floor. Now, if you were able to shut down the power on most of that, you'd probably be able to use the bottom floor, the basement, the subconscious, and engage that more fully, and it basically starts taking control and running the place. It's just that the minute you like meet another person, it's probably gonna disengage a bit so you can like actually talk to them. I keep on thinking about the Tower of Babel and how it's said that like the gods made us learn different languages so we couldn't all connect to each other and all. But I think that languages are something that we developed for the third circuit, the semantic time binding circuit. I think that we actually developed language to be able to communicate on the third circuit. And communicating on the third circuit and relying on the understanding of communication that's derived from the third circuit is apparently disrupting communication that could be happening on the later circuits. So it's not that the gods created something to keep us from being able to do something. It's that the gods talk on this line, and if you talk on that line, then you can't get them. You can get one or the other. Um, So it's more like if the line is busy, then you can't get both signals through at once. Only one signal gets through. Again, like a circuit board, you overload, you arc if you run both at once. So, um, you can do one or you can do the other with the current brain hardware that we have now and the current amount of power we have now. So let's see. That was the neurosomatic, and I think I've fully explored that. I want to look at the other circuits for a bit. Let's look at circuit 6. Um, Now that's not going to be collective neurogenetic. That's going to be neuro metaprogramming. He put them out of order in this book. We talked about that. The metaprogramming circuit. Man is ignorant of of the nature of his own being and powers. Even his idea of his limitations is based on experience of the past. There is therefore no reason to assign theoretical limits to what he may or what he may be or what he may do. The metaprogramming circuit is where you reprogram stuff. So let's see. Yeah, this is the circuit where you can suggest things and it can be correct. Whatever you say it is, it isn't. Third circuit semantic maps are not the territories they represent. We can always make maps of our maps, revisions of our revisions, meta selves of ourselves. Ugh. Let's see. Yogis, mathematicians, and musicians seem more inclined to develop metaprogramming consciousness than most of humanity. Mathematical scripts as an aid to developing the circuit, for as soon as you think of your mind as mind and the mind which contemplates that mind as mind and the mind which contemplates mind, contemplating mind as mind, you are well on your way to metaprogramming. Ah, this is recursive. Understanding that there's an understanding that there's an understanding that there's an understanding. That makes sense. You're going to need to be able to program in space because nobody else can be able to do it for you. Like, I think this is about being able to do things on your own. I think that's why we get all this information that's kind of about, like, humanity's now in training to something bigger that's, going to be like the next stage. And it's like, yeah, technically, but I don't think everybody on this planet is going into space. They're not ready. I do hear from many reports on space travel that people who travel into space, even the near Earth orbit that the like SpaceX rockets and Jeff Bezos go up in, whenever they look down at Earth, they experience a complete transformation of consciousness, like a new level of thought that they'd never really had before. And I wonder if actually looking at pictures of the Earth from space has been helping open up the metaprogramming circuit and the other circuits on a societal level. Maybe just seeing it like that is enough to start kicking in your post space travel brain. This transitional point where we're like about to go but not quite going seems to be very uncomfortable for everyone. Seventh circuit, collective neurogenetic. So let's see. The entire nervous system has been designed like the rest of the body by the code within the DNA molecule, which sends signals via messenger RNA molecules to tell the organism what to do. This is control over DNA. DNA archives become accessible to brain scanning while awake. Awareness of DNA, maybe. Neurogenetic awareness. The first to achieve neurogenetic awareness a few thousand years ago spoke of memories of past lives, reincarnation, immortality, etc. These neurological adepts were speaking of something real in the best language of their day, and is indicated by the fact that many of them gave marvelously accurate, poetic vistas of evolution millenniums before Darwin and foresaw superhumanity before Nietzsche. The Greeks call this the vision of Pan, the Chinese the great Tao, Hindus Atman consciousness, the numinous, awful, sublime god, goddess, and demon figures who appear in the initial stages of this awakening are Jung's archetypes of the collective unconscious, and are recognized as visitors from dream time by primitives, as them from She by witches, and the weird people in 1,000 folk traditions. Gurdjieff calls this circuit the true emotional center. The Akashic records of theosophy, the phylogenetic unconsciousness. Oh, this is the data. Not sorry to be so loud, but I've been tapping into this one a lot and not necessarily on purpose. All right. This is where you use your genetic information to log into humanity's supercomputer, all life's supercomputer of knowledge. I do not think this is humanity based. I think this is having to do with all life, and life might even be rocks for all I know. But I think this is about life/consciousness. Consciousness. I think this is about consciousness. I do not think it is about human life, and I think that is the biggest misinterpretation of the 8 circuit model. So this is where you start accessing the data archives to know when to use this. Synchronicities, meaningful coincidences, roots in the psychoid level below the personal and collective unconsciousness where mind and matter are not yet differentiated. Such synchronicities are a sure sign you're dealing with the neurogenetic circuit. Oh gods, I've been dealing with so many of them. When we explained, she said, that's a synchronicity. I was just watching a TV program about Tutankhamun. Yeah. The earth gives back in new forms what is buried. The seed, the genetic code, and the egg, cellular wisdom. Incorrect. Sends the signal down the aeons. In the simple metaphor of noble geneticist Herbert Muller, we are all giant robots manufactured by DNA to make more DNA. You're part of the programming of an entire species. This is how you log in with your own DNA. That's why the key's your own DNA. That's why nobody else can fake it. That's why everybody uses blood for stuff. It's because it's got DNA in it. That's technically a login. Let's see. Probably located in the right neocortex. More recent than the... Stop saying something's recent. You don't fucking know. Sorry, like, I know that technically it's supposed to be evolutionary timing and all, but if time travel is involved, which it is, we figured that out in the 8th Circuit, then you don't know when anything happened. Sorry, but you need to get out of your semantic time binding circuit for long enough to realize that that's just a circuit, and whatever you think the order is, that's just a thought you think. Thunk. Thanked. Circuit 5 neurosomatic consciousness allows you to converse with the evolutionary architect who designed your body and millions and billions of others since the dawn of life around 3 to 4 million years ago. Mother DNA or father nucleic acid. You really love gendering things. She or he is unconscious. What if they don't have a gender? The rebuttal given by all Circuit 6 adepts in all cultures and ages is that she or he is not unconscious but intoxicated, and it is a divine intoxication. Whether we humanize this architect into a big mama or big daddy, or animalize it into a jackal-headed being like the Egyptian, or intellectualize it into a divine praying mantis, or spiritualize it into something totally abstract, we are only depicting one cross-section of this 3 to 4 billion-year-old being. When we molecularize it as DNA, we are also only seeing one cross-section, the most useful cross-section for scientific analysis. That is, I disagree with that as well. But that is all that needs to be said, or should be said, for the scientific materialist chemicalization of the biosphere, and it is no contradiction of direct experience of the being itself via Circuit 6 yogas. Blah, 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 blah. Most of humanity will just possess the technology to turn on the circuit at will within the next 20 years. Ha! Pardon my French. This evolutionary perspective might possibly be conveyed by a series of quantum jumps in perspective. Thus, the individual can make mistakes, even fatal ones. Consciousness of circuits 1 to 5 is far from infallible. We all get into messes, and sometimes they kill us. Gene pool can make mistakes, but less frequently. Most gene pools have a lifespan far beyond any individual by a factor of many thousands. Obviously, if we judge intelligence by survival, gene pools are more intelligent than any individuals, even geniuses. Ah, you're asking the gene pool. Species is even more intelligent than the gene pool. Lives millions of years longer than any individual, many thousand times longer than any gene pool. The biosphere, Gaia, the DNA script, is more intelligent than all individual gene pools and species. It has survived everything thrown at it for nearly 4 billion years, and it is getting smarter all the time. It is on the edge of achieving immortality, though through the 7th Circuit, by the way. It has a better eye to see itself and judge its trajectories than ever before, and is getting ready to leave this planet and expand across the universe. Beethoven, to cite him one more time, said, "Anybody who understands my music will never be unhappy again." It's because his music is the song of the 7th Circuit, of Gaia, the life spirit, becoming conscious of herself, of her powers, of her own capacities for infinite progress. That's interesting. So I want to get to the quantum circuit. Non-local quantum circuit. Domesticated primate philosopher on an oxygen-supported carbon-based planet circling a type G star was once asked, how do we think? Yeah. Circuits all the way down. We've made a beautiful model of consciousness in terms of brain hardware and software. Now we need to remember again that while the brain can be modeled by a computer, the model is never the whole system. The model maker or metaprogrammer is bigger than the model or program. What are called out-of-body experiences by parapsychologists, awareness seems to escape the confines of the nervous system entirely. Such experiences are routinely triggered by advanced yoga practice. OBEs also occur with heavy... Yeah, you don't have to talk about how you trigger them. Why don't you just talk about them? Example, one day in 1973 during a neuroprogramming experiment, I saw something happening to my son at exactly that time in Arizona, over 500 miles away. First, let's see. Such cases illustrate a special working of what is called quantum mechanics Bell's theorem. Bell's theorem is highly technical, but in ordinary language, it amounts to something like this. There are no isolated systems. Every particle in the universe is instantaneous communication with every other particle. The whole system, even the parts that are separated by cosmic distances, functions as a whole system. Such faster-than-light communication seems to be forbidden by special relativity, which makes a problem. Bell's theorem, however, is inescapable. A theorem in physics is not a mere theory. It is a mathematical demonstration which must be true if the mathematics contains no flaw and if the experiments on which it's based... Yeah, we cannot dispense with special relativity either. Both assume a communication involved in Bellian transmissions does not involve energy, since energy that cannot move faster than light. What does move faster than light is consciousness. I think it's emotion, actually. You may eventually be forced to accept this, in which case physics will have a justified pantheism or at least panpsychism. The medium of Bellian transmissions might be information. Pure information in the mathematical sense does not require energy. It is that which orders energy. It is the negative of entropy, that which brings disorder to energy systems. Imagine that your brain is a computer. Now imagine the whole universe is a big computer. Imagine that the subquantum realm is made up of many, many computers. Now the hardware of each computer is localized. Each part of it is somewhere in space-time, here, not there, now, not then. But the software is non-local. It is here, there, and everywhere, now, then, and everywhere. Interesting. So the hardware, what's running it, and the software is what's being run. So, like, the electromagnetic spectrum? Maybe. So this is the system itself. Metaphysiological circuit, then, is this cosmic information system. The synchronicities of circuits 5 to 7 are just the dawning notes of the symphony of all interrelated harmonies revealed to those who experience circuit 8 in action. It's hard to avoid hyperbole when talking of such matters, but everything one can associate with the idea of oneness with God is part of what is experienced in the vistas beyond space-time of this metaphysiological circuit. Mystics stammer, gibber, and rave incoherently in trying to discuss this. Beethoven says it all. Stop talking about Beethoven so fucking much. The words of Schiller's Ode to Joy, which Beethoven set to this virtually superhuman music, are a linear third circuit map conveying only a skeleton key to the multi-level meanings of the 8-circuit language of the melodic construction itself, which spans all consciousness from primitive biosurvival to metaphysiological cosmic fusion. Usage of the entire system at once. Yeah, you'd have to go non-local to be able to operate it because you are the thing that's being operated. Let's see why they say wheels within wheels within wheels. So what I consider to be circuit 0 is essentially system status. The system's kind of a test to see if the system is functional to be doing all these things. The 8th circuit would need the 0th circuit to be able to gain control. Interesting. So we were talking about space at some point, and I was talking about um, like what would be needed for space travel here, and I think that this awareness of the whole system would certainly be useful when looking at, say, a planetary system and galaxies and all of these moving parts that are moving at once that you have to keep from crashing into each other. I could see how that level of consciousness would be necessary to gain the amount of coordination needed to be able to travel through space. Um, and then the genetic thing, gaining access to all that knowledge. Um, it just reminds me of how pretty much every space movie has like this supercomputer in the spaceship that can tell you anything instantly. And this sounds like it's the supercomputer. So that's interesting. Um, I wonder if these circuits are more able to be engaged on planet than we realize. I think that especially in certain societies where they actually like have like a place, like if you were in a convent, I think that you would be able to open up your fifth through eighth circuits a lot more easily, because I think that the social structure within the convent would allow for um, more of this type of work. For instance, a vow of silence, I think, would be very helpful, because you wouldn't have to endure so much conversational exchange to like kind of mess up your head every day whenever you're kind of keeping this state of consciousness where you're talking with God instead, or whatever kind of sense of things. Um, it's interesting. It really seems like religion is supposed to be there to kind of help keep up these other circuits and preserve them until they need to be used. And instead, it's been misinterpreted as everybody needs to be like this. But that doesn't make sense. You need the first through fourth circuits in most of human society who's interacting. And then you would need the fifth through eighth circuits preserved for whenever society needs to move, or whenever society needs to specialize. The first through fourth circuits are very generals. It seems like that's kind of sitcom family stuff. Um, but if you need some kind of specialization, I think you would engage with the later circuits to develop yourself into someone who can access a lot more knowledge and use a lot more skills than is usually possible with the others. So it's interesting. And the more I talk about it, the more I just want to be like a space traveler. I think that I'm actually suited for this. Um, I think that a lot of people in the current day are actually suited more for space travel and space living than living on this planet. And we're probably going to see within the next couple hundred years some kind of mass migration off the planet. Not because the planet's no good anymore. Gods, people, why don't you like be an optimist? Maybe we're going to mass migrate off the planet because we want to. There's no need to force us off the planet. There's no need for us to like be like, oh, we got to leave the planet now because we got too big for it. It's like, no, I think we just want to explore space because it's time. Let's go do it. We don't need to have a reason to get out there. We should just go. So I'm ready. Let's go. Um, this is it. This has been the 8th Circuit model. This has been space travel on the 8th Circuit model. Let's go to the moon.